RLTK podcast. What is up, everybody? Jordan here, kicking it with my boy Chris. Chris, what is going on, my boy?
What's up, G?
You all right?
I'm all right, man.
Bro, you are in contemplation mode today. I can already tell. I can see it by the look in your eyes, the cup of coffee in your hand. You're contemplating some stuff right now.
A little bit. Trying to understand some things. I think we're in a very. I think there's a big opportunity for the church to really shine a light, and so I'm just thinking through what does that look like. So, yeah.
I think we can get into that a little bit today. Candice, no pressure. So I guess you're going to have to answer that question for us. How does the church...
How does the church shine a light? If we all let our individual light shine in some way, then there is illumination? No? Okay.
I mean, I hope so. But hey, welcome to the podcast. Man. Thanks you for jumping on with us.
Thanks for having me. We're grateful
that you are here. Absolutely.
It's good to be here with you all. I truly do admire the work that y'all are doing, the conversations that y'all are having. So it's just always cool to just be able to sit down and chop it up and have a seat at the table.
No doubt. I appreciate it. Yeah, we finna build a table. Right. There, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
All right. So our peeps who listen obviously wouldn't know who you are other than your name. So tell us who you are, how you got here, what you do, the good stuff.
Yeah. Candice Wynn, and the journey, it's never as simple as it sounds. There's parts of it that I think for me, I am in a season of looking back and seeing how it's all come together and seeing how it makes sense. I walk with a lot of people, and they sometimes I don't really see what God is doing. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I'm looking at them. I'm just like, yo, it's so clear to me. How do you not see it? How do you not see it? And I feel like I'm in a season where I look back and I'm like, man, I thought I understood what God was doing in my life. And I thought I understood the path that God was taking me on. But I feel like it's most recently coming together in a different kind of way than what I had thought. And I love it. Oh my gosh, I love it. So I started out, as a child, I wanted to heal children. So I'm like, hey, I want to be a pediatrician, because as a child, you think, who heals children? Pediatricians, very, very basic, And then when I went to high school, I took a class in psychology because I had the biggest crush on a teacher, man. You can't tell me that God can't work through crushes. I had the biggest crush on the teacher. So I decided to take a psychology class, and I discovered the world of psychology. Had never heard of it before. And I'm like, man, I want to go into child psychology. So still that angle of healing children, just from a different angle. And I pursued undergraduate work at Florida A&M University, studied psychology. And I had an opportunity to just do a lot of research while I was there, partnered with the professor, and did, I was researching the effects of with her, I was exploring the effects of perceived racism on blood pressure. But then independently, I started exploring the role that religion and spirituality plays in the coping process. And I look back and I'm just like, man, I feel like my life has just been a continuous, journey of that in some way, So I went to seminary right after undergrad and got into the world of youth ministry. I did youth ministry in the local church for about 13 or 14 years before stepping out and shifting into youth ministry coaching and consulting. And after doing that for a number of years, I launched Boone. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but with the work that I do with Boone, we are pursuing and exploring Black youth and theological praxis and discipleship. And just what does it really look like to disciple Black youth, and what are the things that they might uniquely need? And
Mm.
at work, we're just discovering a lot of gaps that exist within the field of Black childhood theology, and just diving into that. And I spend my days just exploring, reading, and unpacking. And it is just so incredibly fun for me. I've had to start pursuing different hobbies around the house because I'm like, yo, if I'm just sitting here like just reading and writing all day, I'm totally fine with that. But you got to have those breaks and those pauses. So I just am really in this season of just literally just sitting and just watching what's happening and unpacking it, and just working to explore new lanes of Black children, youth faith development, theological praxis, discipleship. And it's bringing me so much joy, y'all. So much joy.
So good. I got
That's
so many
dope.
questions beaming around in my mind right now. I'm actually like literally writing stuff down. But one of the things I wanted to ask, which is a little bit of a diversion, but not really, because I think we all three of us live in the same world in different ways, and I know that because I know you both, even though you guys don't know each other both yet. Like the entrepreneurial journey that we're
Mm-hmm.
all on in different ways, because I know we're all on it. Like it's interesting that you said what you said. You feel like God's bringing things together in some really cool ways. Like, and I think I feel like youth workers in particular are uniquely equipped to be entrepreneurial. Like I think you have to be if you're going to be a youth worker, because you just literally have to create and come up with stuff out of nowhere. Like no one's
Yeah.
done it before. There's like, I mean, there are books you can read. There are people that have done cool things, but like youth culture moves fast, and so does youth ministry culture, right? And so like I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, man, like as we endeavor to build things for the glory of God, as we endeavor to like build things for the context that we're from, as we endeavor to build things for the urban space. And maybe I'm just asking this personally because I'm thinking about this myself right now. Like how have you stayed locked in, walking with God through the difficulties that are building something from the ground up?
That's a good question. I don't know that I feel like I've had a choice. I feel like the way that my entrepreneurial journey has kept me on my knees, literally and figuratively, it's a humbling experience. When I was in, so I recently took a trip back to, I went, like I said, I went to Florida A&M University. I recently took a trip back to Tallahassee, walking through fam, took my kids with me, my husband there too. And the School of Psychology where I studied in was right next to the School of Business. And I remember just looking at the people. I never stepped foot in the School of Business, never had a need to, right? I never understood the people who wanted to pursue business and people who were saying, I want to be entrepreneurs. I never understood it. Like, I don't understand why someone would say, hey, I want to go find the chicken, kill the chicken, clean the chicken, cook the chicken, when I can just go buy a 10-piece lemon pepper chicken wings, right?
Mm.
I'm the
Now
one
we
who's
having a
always been like,
conversation.
yo, I just want to go somebody else and go give me the paycheck. I don't want to have to go hunting my food. Um, it's been a very humbling experience because it's something that I never thought that I had the skill set or the ability to do. I never thought that I had an entrepreneurial bone in my body. But the ways that God has, so when I first got the idea of launching Boone, it was literally just, hey, let's just start a Facebook group. I literally got the idea and I went over to Facebook. Let me just start the Facebook group. And I just started creating the Facebook group. Then I was like, pause. Right before I like created it all out, I was like, pause. Because God just started dropping different things in my spirit. And I was like, yo, this can be, and it can be. I was like, maybe I should do this a little more strategically. And the way that God has just constantly been filling me with ideas and ideas, but then there's ideas without a whole lot of money, right?
Mm,
So having to do the work of understanding, okay, what don't I know? What relationships do I need to pursue? Who do I need to work to become? Right? I have literally written down a list of, in this lane that I'm pursuing, what type of person do I need to be? What kind of
that's
skills
good.
do I need to have? Literally a list, right? And then I take that list and I have work to like, create like, okay, what are some resources I know, podcasts, TV shows, movies, books, what kind of research do I need to have? And I created out like a 3-year continuing education program for myself. Like,
Yo,
seriously,
you ain't playing
I'm
no
like,
games.
no, because I've realized like, my background is in youth ministry. I don't know the entrepreneurial lane. I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
smart enough to figure it out now, but that's just not my background. And I understand the vision that God has given me, and I understand what comes along with that responsibility and the ways that I have worked to maintain, integrity to it and work to just honor the vision that God has given me. It's required me to stay on my knees. I'm an avid journaler. I mean, I journal probably. It's nothing for me to be sitting here at my desk staring out the window. My neighbors probably think I'm crazy. Like seriously, like just staring out the window and journaling because I'm getting ideas or different thoughts or concepts that come together, and I'm just writing, and I know that it's not me that's formulating certain concepts or certain thoughts. I know that it's God that's connecting certain dots for me. And I recognize that in order for me to do the work that God has called, this sounds going to sound so basic, but I know that for me to do the work that God is calling me to, I've got to be positioned and postured in a certain kind of way. And it's impossible otherwise, but it's required a complete shift. Working for myself has required a different kind of work ethic, a different kind of shift in my productivity, because I recognize that 9 to 5, okay, like this is my hours of working, go, 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 go. That doesn't work for me. Like, I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely times when I am, like definitely zoned in during, like work hours, but when God drops an idea, it may come at 10 o'clock at night. It may come on a Saturday morning. So
Yep.
just recognizing and honoring that I need to be in the flow in order to catch the wave, right?
That's good.
So being able to position myself I need mental breaks. I mean, there's times I go down to the trail, down the street, or to the park around the corner, and just kind of just like allow myself to just be in this world and exist in this world, and allow myself to have the space to dream and create. Because creating, honestly, I mean, I sit at my desk when I'm working on something. I don't I don't know that creation and conceptualizing happens in this seat. It happens when I'm up and about and I'm moving. So that's a long way around to answer your question. It's been a
No, it's good.
journey. It's been a
That's really good.
humbling journey. Like
That's
straight up.
really good. No, 100%. I'm right there with you. Like
What do you do? What do y'all do? What is that? How would y'all answer that question?
I'm still trying to answer it. That's why I asked you.
Yeah.
Um, I think when I think about what I'm doing right now, like I'm doing the same thing. It's like it's all an experiment, right? So I'm trying to figure out like what works. And then it's like, okay, this works, 10% of this works, 90% of this doesn't. Let me keep the 10%. Let me figure something else with the 90%. So like you're talking about, continuing to educate myself. So reading books, listening to podcasts, who are people that I trust as entrepreneurs that are credible and legitimate. How do I follow them, consume their content, eat the meat,
Mm.
spit out the bones, right?
Yeah.
And then who are the relationships that I need to have? Who are the people that I need to be talking to? Who are the people that I need to be learning from? What can I learn from my pastor? What can I learn from you? What can I learn from Chris?
Mm-hmm.
And once again, you're so right. Like there's so many times where God gives ideas and it very rarely comes while I'm sitting in this chair in this office,
Mm-hmm.
just like sitting here waiting for God to say something. It often comes in conversation with somebody, like an idea gets sparked, or it's, right before you go to bed when your brain finally slows down long enough and then you get this dump of information, or it's 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm having anxiety about the thing that I'm trying to build. And then I finally slow down enough to actually hear what God has to say, or whatever it is. Right. And so I find that oftentimes those creative moments, those creative ideas come when I least expect them to. And so I just have notes all in my iPhone with just random ideas all over the wazoo. I even have certain notes where it's like, okay, here's just an actually mind dump of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of them I execute on, some of them I don't, some of them I recognize that's down. And I think I'm getting
Yeah.
better at this, recognizing like what I can do right now, what I can't do right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, okay, that is something that I could do if this happens a year from now. And then, hey, this is something I can actually execute on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that'll be really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I answer it right now. I
That
think.
pacing has been major for me too. One day I was actually sitting here and I felt God just drop in my spirit the words resist the urge to rush. And it was a reminder to slow down. And one, it was the thing was it was speaking to one, definitely scalability and in scaling, the business that I'm building, but also my pace and what's required of me to create. And that whole rushing, yeah, I don't produce well like that.
That's good. Yeah, there's this guy named Cal Newport. He wrote this book called Deep Work. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the idea of one of the skills that will be most valuable in an age where things move incredibly fast is the ability to do work for long, like to lock yourself in on a piece of work for a long period of time and actually be focused on it. So he like advocates for working in, a couple hour blocks. And then what'll happen is you actually have the capacity to do something that a lot of people can't do, and you'll be able to create things that a lot of people can't create as a consequence.
Mm.
And I know a lot of people are like worried about AI, right? And like all that's going to do, but I think that AI will enhance your creative capacity if you know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what it'll also do is for those of us that are, for lack of better terminology, faking creative capacity, because we have a lot of people out there who are just, if you know how to market something, you can sell anything. I think AI will replace that, right? But I don't think it'll replace people who have expertise. I think it'll enhance the expertise that they have. So yeah, that's good. Chris, you got anything you want to ask right now?
Uh,
I know I do.
no, for sure. I guess for me, it's just interesting to hear the story of the process of imitation and what it takes to um, imitate something that is proper that will bring particular types of fruit in the community. Like we want to produce fruit in the community. We want to bring good to the community. And but what it takes is not only trusting God and believing in his word, but our effort in that is to imitate him in that process. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting to hear that when you tell your story, like all the thinking, him dropping things in your mind, journaling, the work that you do. Even you said that you like, what do I have to look like? And so it's like, to some degree, our task is to know what to imitate, to
Mm-hmm.
bring out the fruit that we want to see God produce in the community. So it's and like you said in the beginning, it's a long road, man, because it's also psychological barriers in the mind that we have to hurdles that we have to jump over, walls we have to break down. Like it's also a mental thing, to wrap your mind around the things that you should be and look like. And so I thought that was pretty interesting to hear you say those things
Yeah,
like that.
I totally, yes. It has been, I think I know this for a fact. If when I first, the first time I felt called to ministry, I was 9 years old, didn't really understand what was happening. It wasn't until I was in college, I was about a junior in college, that I felt the call to ministry again. God was pushing me towards pursuing, something within the faith realm. I don't know. I think at the time, the mentors that I have in my head in my life, forever grateful for them. I think that the route that I pursued looked a lot like theirs. And I think at the moment, that was what I had the capacity to accept and what I had the confidence in myself to walk in, not even really having the confidence in myself to walk in it, but I'm like, okay, if God, I feel like you're pushing me towards youth ministry and maybe to get ordained and to preach. And so, okay, yeah, let me say that yes to this. And I said yes to that, and I pursued that for many years. And then it was, okay, God, you're now leading me towards working in the field of coaching and consulting. Okay, how do I wrap my head around what ministry looks like in this lane? Because for me, I look back, I'm like, yo, I had a hardest time understanding what ministry looked like in the coaching and consulting. It didn't connect for me instantly. I mean, as I say that now, it sounds kind of foolish, but at the time, that was where I was. I couldn't
Mm,
conceptualize it in my mind. But it took a second for me to kind of, okay, this is what my ministry looks like now, working with the adults who work with the young people. And that required a different kind of yes. And then when I went to launch Boone, it required even a different kind of yes, of pursuing entrepreneurship, of galvanizing people together differently. And then now that I'm kind of, we had an opportunity to go on a listening tour last year, and the results of the work of that tour are some of the things that we're doing now, of carving out this lane of exploring Black youth theological praxis and discipleship. Had my 19-year-old, 20-year-old self knew that I
mm,
was going to go down this route, I, I would have never been able to see that for myself. I would have never been able to
mm,
say yes to myself. It's been a constant evolution of yeses and walking in obedience. And I think that the ways that I've had to learn to see myself differently, has it's been different. It's been interesting because I think that everybody looks at, gosh, I feel like, when your career is quote unquote taking off, I don't know that people are necessarily recognizing it personally as my career is taking off, right? Like
Mm.
personally, I might look at it as, hey, I'm still on the ground, we're still, what is it called? Riding, I can't think of what it's called when it's called taxiing, right? Maybe we're just still taxiing, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
mm,
but for some
mm,
people, outsiders looking in, they're looking at it as, man, you're flying. And you don't always recognize that you're flying. And then the responsibility that comes with that. I think for me this year, the first few months of 2025 have been an impactful experience of me recognizing my influence and my responsibility. And I'm not saying that have arrived, because I really still don't think that I'm quote unquote arrived, or I mean, like, what does it really look like to quote unquote arrive in youth ministry other than to be obedient to God, right? I mean, but I think that I'm learning to recognize my responsibility in this seat as an executive director differently. Like I understood, hey, as an executive director, I'm responsible for funding and organizational structure and making sure our programming, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to other broader aspects of my responsibility for my influence, I think I'm just learning. I'm just learning that different kind of ways. So been a constant evolution of me seeing myself differently, um, and learning to walk more confidently in what it is that God will have me to do, and
mm,
submitting, and just being willing to submit
mm.
to what that looks like.
That's good. So tell us more about Boone then. We've kind of danced around it a little bit. Tell us
Yeah.
what it is, why it
Mhm.
exists.
Yep. Why it exists is a whole conversation in itself. But so Boone is an acronym for Born Out of Necessity, and we are a national network for leaders who are faith influencers for Black children and youth. We define faith influencers as anyone who influences the faith of the next generation, whether it be youth pastors. I think sometimes we oftentimes, you know, put all the responsibility on youth pastors, and that's not right, or whoever the youth leader is at a certain um, church or a faith based organization. But the reality is, like whatever, if you work with young people and you are a believer, in Christ, then you have a
Mm,
responsibility to them. Whether you are in education, whether you are a coach, whether you are a mentor, whether you are the neighbor across the street, we have a
mm,
responsibility in the lives of our young people. And what does it really look like if the broader village and the community comes around our babies a bit differently, and really just intentionally disciples from different angles? I know personally, my years as in youth, like my husband is a coach, my years in youth ministry, one thing that I've always said to my husband is that you have a great opportunity to influence, because the students are coming out to the field because they love football and they want to play football. Y'all are bonding over this common interest, and the teachable moments and the daily connection and the opportunities or influence are so much greater on that field than they are for me within the church, because of the consistency and the influence that you have in that position. And I know my kids play sports nonstop, and I just look at some of the ways that some of their coaches speak life and not, because I see it all, and I'm like, yo, you have a responsibility. So the work that we do within Boone is working to, one, helping faith influencers to understand their influence and their responsibility, and then just doing the work to equipping people by giving the village a village, by building the community. It's been, when we first started out Boone, we were solely serving those who work within Black churches and faith-based organizations. And I think that was one of the things that we had to decolonize ourselves on, right? So when we first started creating the organization, we created a carbon copy of what we saw with a lot of these predominantly white organizations, except we said it's for Black people though. And then after, going on the road and talking with people and having surveys, we realized, what do our young people really need? So we've done a lot of work of doing the work of more so centralizing youth and decentralizing the adults. So centralizing what are the needs of children and teenagers a bit differently than what we had before. That's what's kind of led us down this lane of just pursuing, discipleship and theological praxis, and how we can take our exploration of that and make it practical. I think a lot of people there's not a whole lot of research that exists when it comes to Black youth. There is stuff that's out in their faith. There is stuff that's out there, but a lot of it is within the academy. And the average person, neighbor, the average person, coach, isn't going to be able to read this huge book or read these scholarly articles. So we're doing a lot of work of practicalizing. That's the real word. Practicalizing
It makes
the
sense.
research of the academy, and connecting some dots for people to make it make sense, to make it, okay, this is what okay, this is what I do. All right, I got it. So we're going to pull people together, carve out this lane of theological praxis and discipleship, and just help to really pave a new way for Black young people. This year we're starting out. Well, last year we started out exploring youth, because we just funding small nonprofit. But as we continue venturing, we'll definitely expand to explore children too.
No, it's good. I think one of the things that's interesting for me as I hear you talk, I'm thinking about this idea of Black theology, or the reality of Black theology. And there was this point in time where I felt like I was lied to. And what I mean is, I picked up a J.D. Otis Roberts book, Black Theology and Dialogue, and read it. And I was like, oh, number one, this is super dope. Number two, the theology is more than solid.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, as someone who I didn't grow up in church, right? So I became a believer in neo-Pentecostal Arminian, European context, right? So so then as I'm reading this theology, and as I went to seminary, you're kind of told in seminary, hey, these certain types of people are dangerous. These certain types of ideas are dangerous, James Cone is dangerous,
Yeah.
whatever. And so then you go read some of this stuff and you're like, oh, okay. All right. I'm a little confused right now. And also then it just gave clarity to things that I didn't understand. One of the things that I thought was most profound was when J.D. Otis talks about this idea of, for African Americans, worship necessitates protest. So out of worship, they go to the streets to protest because they don't have food on the table, because they have certain needs that need to be met. I'm like, oh. And then when you're in other contexts, it's well, we can just sit around and talk about stuff because we have the capacity to sit around and talk about stuff. And it was just oh, that makes perfect sense. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. I think that's like a perfect, valuable, valid critique. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And
it
so
is.
it's really interesting now to sit like in a space where I read from all different contexts in spaces and places. And like, I think all of it's necessary because we need to discern the mind of Christ together, everything that's inside of orthodoxy, right?
Mm,
But it's like we're told things aren't orthodox when I read them, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like he didn't say Jesus isn't the Christ. He didn't say, you know what
mm,
I'm saying? Like, he didn't say the Trinity don't exist. Like,
yeah.
like
It's the
what are we
different
doing here?
needs. Yeah, it's the different to me, it's the different needs of different communities, right? Because, we recently for I guess the Holy Week, we put out some content called Somebody's Son. So exploring the double
Mm-hmm.
entendre of Jesus being somebody's son, and then paralleling it to the somebody's sons and daughters of the world. But we explored it through the lens of lament, and one of the angles we came at it from was also just the injustice and looking at protest. As a form of lament, but also that
Mm,
whole worship piece too, looking at it as, because in order to really take up any aspect of injustice, there has to be a deep sort of something that you're lamenting. There has to be some aspect of something that is just unsettling within your spirit. So yes, it needs to be predicated with worship, because in order to step into this, I need to be able to um, wrestle with the feelings. And if anyone is taking up any form of injustice and is not lamenting something, then what are you really doing? You have to first be upset and troubled by something, and grieving something that does not exist, right? Or something that has happened. And then, hey, let's stand up against it. So yeah, I definitely think within different communities, it looks a whole lot different. Even another aspect of something that we explored is just human limitation, and I know as a parent, the way that I look at it played out in my children's lives, of how I am one of those, like, I'm going to maximize 24 hours. I'm going to get it done kind of person. But I think one of the things that the whole piece of what God was telling me to slow down is because of recognizing what's needed for effective production is to recognize, hey, I don't have to push myself. And coming from a lineage of people who grandparents work several jobs, you have parents who are working so many, pushing, like, hey, push. We glorify the grind, right? And we don't always glorify the the need to stop, the need to pause. And there was a situation recently with my daughter where someone on her team broke her wrist. My daughter plays softball. Someone on her softball team broke her wrist. Same day, my daughter is saying, I don't want to go to this game. I just don't feel like it. Right? The wrist being broken, we accept that as a limitation. But her mental, I just I just can't do it today. We don't always honor the limits of just the mind, right? And the physical capacity or the mental capacity that somebody might have, or especially our children. Nah, you're gonna show up because I didn't pay these registration fees. I didn't bought you this new I didn't bought you these new cleats, right? You got this
Yeah.
equipment, this bat, this bag, this glove. Somebody's gonna be on the field today at 7 o'clock, baby, and that somebody's gonna be you, right? But at the same time, like, hey, how are we modeling for our young people? Hey, you've got to be able to recognize when you're hitting a limit, and recognize when you need to pause and stop, because that personal discernment, that the ability to discern, it kind of really starts with yourself. So if you can discern your spirit and what God is speaking to you personally, then you just setting our young people up a little bit differently in life.
mm,
But that's hard
uh,
because
Yep.
the
that's good.
history of our people, and how that whole, I want my child to succeed, I want my child to make it, like that. It's
Mm,
tough.
mm,
I guess like so my question is how do we preserve the the moral the how do we preserve the morality of the youth in the pursuit of justice? I guess that's my question. And then in the idea of fighting for justice, because I think that there's a potential of losing your morals and trying to make things right.
Hmm.
So that's just my question.
I agree with that. And I think it's tough. I think anytime, and I'm not going to answer this like I'm, just like have all the answers for everything. I just tell you what I think,
Mm. Yeah.
But I feel like that is definitely something that's tough because anytime someone has experienced injustice, it hurts. And it's hard to separate your actions from the pain that you're experiencing. And sometimes we act out of the pain, you know. But I think having good intentions about why you're doing something and what it is that you really want to accomplish and what you really want to see kind of can help you right size that. I know for me, I've been asking myself that same question as I've been just exploring some things personally lately. And I keep asking myself, well, what is it that I want, and what is true justice? And I think a lot of times people will say, justice is equity, and and I do think that there is an equity piece of equity that exists within justice, and then justice is making things right. I do think there's a bit of making things right within justice, but I think ultimately what people need is healing,
Mm.
and there's some people who speak out against injustice and you can tell that they're speaking out from of a place of just deep wounds, and it is never, I mean, we all need a place to process our thoughts and our experiences, but I think when you're clear about what it is that you really want, I think when it comes to Black communities, the need for healing is so incredibly real, and not just healing but like generational healing,
Mm.
where future generations are better positioned to advance because of something that was done from another, it may be like for something that's done now, future generations are in a better position because of some form of justice that took place. I think I've had I had a cousin who was after her senior year in high school, she was heading to college and was shot in a drive-by. Her murderers ended up being convicted, being put in jail. To me, that's not justice. Like, I think that it's an aspect of, okay, they got what they deserved. Some people may say that that's justice, but I think about how you define it, And so for me, a huge part of it is a healing that needs to exist within people in order for justice to really happen, and not just healing for people right now, but like a generational healing, like a generational kind of getting back on course and no longer being, wounded or impacted by those things. Like, yeah, we allow it to shape us and to build us, and for it to be a part of our story, but we there's a different kind of healing that exists, and I think that
Mm.
if young people are clear about what it is that they're doing and why, and what do they
Mm.
really, really want, then I think
You
that
know,
we set them up differently.
I like the way you said that. Healing. When I think about healing, so when it comes to the Black community, I don't really focus on, um, like, let's picture like a valley and a gate is around it, right? The gate surrounds the valley, and there's only one way you can enter in the valley, right? It has walls. And the Black community is in that circle. I don't think about what's outside the circle. I think about what's in. And let's say, I think the idea of uh, racism in itself, I think it's outside the walls. I think about what's in the sense of what are we doing to each other, because that's mainly what I'm focused on, is not what's outside the walls, but what's in. What are we doing within the walls of the community, um, um, to bring about justice in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't concern myself with that outside the walls. I want to concern with the justice within, because we're also doing things to each other. And when I think of healing, I think of uh, like a bone that's broken.
Mm-hmm.
And when the bone is broken, what do you do to it? You look at it, you observe it, you put it in a position and wrap it up where it can heal. And what it's doing, it's growing and putting itself back in its position to where it can operate how it was made to operate.
Yes.
And so when I look at the Black community, that's what I'm thinking about is how can we put ourselves in a position where we can go back to operate how we were supposed to.
Yes.
And that's what I think about when I think of healing. But it almost seems as though justice can't come until we heal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because how can you fight with a broken arm? How can you serve with something that is broken, right? And so to a certain extent, um, this is just a theory, but I think to a certain extent that justice will always be broken because we're broken, right? We cannot actually have it. But to some degree, God allows things. And so he takes it upon himself for that, right? Because it's, uh, how can you really correct anything? And I guess I just ended with this and asked the question, like you was asking me earlier, things I'm thinking about is one of the things I'm thinking about is how can we correct things in society, which to some degree, I don't think we actually know what to correct. I don't think we know what to critique. I don't think we know what's actually wrong. And this is why I think that the church is in a good position, in a better opportunity right now to actually bring out things and bring to light what's actually wrong. So we actually can know what to correct.
Mm-hmm.
Because to some degree, I don't think we know what to do here.
I
You
agree. And
know?
I do know what you mean. So yes, so a huge part of one of the things that I was processing when God dropped in my spirit the whole hey healing is just thinking about the effects of looking inside that valley with that gate,
Mm,
right? What are
mm-hmm,
the effects of colonization? And I think that we are living with a lot of the um, residuals, a lot of the
mm-hmm,
effects, but not always clearly seeing that that's what it is. And I think that that I'm not going to say everything is, the colonization isn't the cause of everything, but it's the cause of a lot. And I think it's the cause of a lot of a lot of mindsets that have become generational ideologies and generational ways of being and moving and existing, and things that have been considered to be acceptable and appropriate and norms and things like that, that I think we have got to be able to work through. And I think that even the people who are the most aware and able to identify and put language to you know different things, pieces of colonization, like we all are colonized to some degree, we all are. And I think that first, one of the first pieces of is recognizing, what does that look like for you? Like me, I live in a Atlanta. I live in one of the neighborhoods in Atlanta where gentrification has not quite really taken off too much. But I think that even in my kids growing up in a two-parent home where we know pretty decent morals,
mm-hmm,
they're still, and even the work that I do within, for Black youth children too, I'm recognizing, like I mentioned earlier, the pressure that I'm placing on my children to show up, for practice, to show up for games, and how I expect them to show up because, hey, we've got to be twice as good to get half as far. Those kind of mindsets that still within me live, that I'm putting on my kids, that I don't necessarily really recognize, right? And I think
mm-hmm,
there's a lot of different ways, big and little, messages that we communicate and we unconsciously place within our young people, that they shouldn't have to bear the weight of. So I think it requires a lot of self-reflection to be aware of yourself, and what are you putting out there? What are you actually saying when you're doing certain things, and what is it doing to the younger generations that you're responsible for shepherding and discipling when you communicate
Yeah.
certain messages, when you say certain things, like, because there comes a point where we've got to start having, there's some messages that are positive, but there's some messages that need to we need to be aware of, and becoming more self-aware is also, I think, a huge part of it too. Being aware of the role
Mm.
that you play in certain things.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, I think. But that's very hard to, uh, like self accountability.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the most hardest thing that a human can do because this is why the cross talks about dying to yourself, right? The awareness that if you are aware of what you do, it's almost in a sense of it's called that awareness is telling you to die, right? It's telling you to die so Christ can live. You know what I mean? And that's very difficult, and especially when it comes to young people. And when I'm around the youth, or when I'm around people that are younger than me, it doesn't matter the color, but sometimes it is uh, black, the black youth. I'm more concerned about their thought process
Mm-hmm.
and how they think and how they formulate ideas and how they perceive things. And I think that's the most, I think that's actually the most important thing that we should be able to focus on because to some degree, self-awareness does, um, self-awareness depends on how you think about things. And I think if you don't know how to process certain things, I don't think you'll be able to be self-aware of your own actions and how you contribute to the decay of the community. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think to some degree, how you process things matters. Is that something that you see a lot when you work with the youth? Is there like what is something that you see when it comes to the mind of the young people that you work with?
Yeah. I think so. A lot of the work that I'm doing and focus on, yeah, definitely still working with young people, but also looking at adults too. And I think a lot of times us adults want to point fingers at the kids and teenagers and say, y'all need to think like this, y'all need to do this, y'all need to do that. When what example are we setting? And it's not always, you don't necessarily have to be cussing somebody out to set a bad example. And I think we need to be aware as adults what it is that we're actually saying when we say certain things. We need to be aware of what it is that we're really doing when we do certain things. And I think a lot of times us adults aren't aware of the example that we're setting, and we see kids doing a certain thing and it's like, well, I don't know why these kids acting like that. There's a commercial. I don't know if y'all familiar with the commercial. It was, I guess this was in, I'm not sure, it was in the 90s, maybe 80s and 90s commercial, when the little boy was caught. Maybe he was smoking weed or something, cigarettes or something, some kind of smoking something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And the dad was like, Where'd you learn this? Where'd you learn this? And the boy was like, from you. I learned it from watching you. And I think that that is just so, I know I've seen that, Jordan, because you didn't grow up in the States, but
Mm-hmm.
it's very real. And I think that, one of the conversations that we're having, because a lot of what we do is not necessarily trying to justify the actions of youth, but to understand them, right? To understand them differently. And I don't know that people have really tried to understand them in
Hmm.
certain kind of ways, especially when it pertains to their faith, right? So some people might look at it like, hey, y'all are just a bunch of gentle parenting. And it's not gentle parenting. We're just trying to understand, understand and make sense out of some actions that are happening. Because if you understand something and you understand the undertone behind it, then a lot of times acting out or a certain way of thinking is because due to a certain undertone that has never been addressed in a different kind of way. So how can you address whatever the undertone that exists in order to get to the action, and a lot of it requires just not like my oldest is only 11, but he's a preteen, and he has a personality on him that we have had some drama in our house, right? And I think one of the things that he's been teaching me is patience differently, because my first reaction is not always a good one, and I've had to just stop and not respond at all and cannot say anything, because I know if I say anything, I might be allowing him to influence my actions. And I want to be, not to say that he can't influence me in some kind of way. Yeah. But in those kind of moments, I want to be the driver. I want to influence him on how to respond. Right. So not necessarily offering knee jerk reactions and, you know, allowing pauses to be incredibly pregnant and incredibly drawn out in order for me to respond in the best kind of way. And I don't always get it right, because as much as he's got a personality, I do too, right? So we kind of feed off each other sometimes, but recognizing what's happening and being able to kind of like hold up, pause. Let's address what's really the root of what's going on here in order to really get to it. And some of a lot of it requires me to just look at myself, and look at what examples have I set, what foundation have I laid for him, if he's engaging a certain kind of way.
No, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like, we don't think about how important modeling behavior is. We think about modifying the behavior of the person that we're trying to address, and we don't realize in how we modify their behavior is actually what they're catching more than us telling them how to modify the behavior, right? You see what I'm saying? So if I'm attacking them, being angry, frustrated, all this, that's the stuff that they're actually catching more than they are what it is that I'm saying, right? We want kids to be more patient than us. We want them to be better leaders than us. Like, we want them to understand what it's like to be us and not for us to understand what it's like to be them. And it's like, well, then who's the leader?
That's
us
right.
or them, right? We're asking them to be the leaders, essentially, which like makes no sense whatsoever. But I get it. Like, part of it is we haven't really thought through what we're doing and why we're doing it and how that makes sense or doesn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? And I think to some degree that kind of speaks into the larger conversation of healing and wholeness and shalom, all the things we're trying to bring. Like, we got to step into those spaces and behave and model a different type of behavior to the people that we're rocking with. I got to model a different type of behavior to my youth. I got to model a different type of behavior to my family, to my friends, a behavior that models Christ. I got to model a different type of behavior in the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? That would demonstrate to people that I move at a different pace, that I believe a different thing, that, that I perceive the world a different way. And, I think that stuff's really important. Yeah. Chris, your camera went off, just so you know. I don't know why. Your phone don't like you, bro.
Yeah, I know. That's why I always use the laptop, but
I ain't editing that out. I don't care.
Was it I understand modeling, I do. And I think
imitating, right? Like you said, imitating at the beginning of the conversation. Imitating.
Yep. Well, imitation is one of that's how we engage the world. I think the core function of a human is imitation and imagination. And I think that is something that we don't have to learn how to do. I think that's something that we have to perfect throughout time. But I think the way we engage. Okay.
Do you think there's a lack of imagination in like the neighborhood? Do you think that's part of the problem?
And a second part of that question, can I double up on that? So is there a lack of imagination in the neighborhood, right? Also, and then what role does identity play in all of that too?
That's good. I think there is a lack of imagination when it comes to pursuing the good, when it comes to doing the right thing. when it comes to getting money, I think imagination is abundant, almost to the point of evil. And so I think there is nothing, I think when it comes to imagination, I think I have to think about what is the purpose of imagination. And I think the purpose of imagination is to imagine the good and to pursue it. Like when I think of kids, if you look at kids, they really can't tell you they're left or right. They can't articulate their emotions very well. They can't do a lot of things well, but what they can do is imitate and imagine. And I think that is something that God has given us to engage with when it comes to existence. That's how we engage and understand the world, is that we imitate our environment and we use our imagination to navigate through the idea of right and wrong. I think when it comes to identity, though, I think that's a little bit more tough because to some degree, experience shapes the way you perceive yourself. And I think you identify with what you find pleasure in, and you also identify what you've been traumatized by. And so I think identity has to be given. I don't think you can actually give yourself an identity. I think it has to be given to you. And I think it's also informed by your parents. And I think that's something that only God can actually do. Because when I think about identity, I think about attributes and I think about core self. And all of that is borrowed. I think it's borrowed. I don't know if identity is something that is something of your own. I think identity shows you who you belong to. And that is something that Christ does. He shows us who we belong to. I'm a child of God. We are children of God. That is the identity that I've been given, and it points to the intrinsicness of my nature, which is, this is who I belong to. I belong to God, and there's nothing I can really do with that. And so I think that's something we have to bring to the community, is to show this is your intrinsic worth. Like when you think about attributes, we were made in the likeness and the image of Christ. The whole point, one of the biggest things that Christ does, he shows you in the cross, in his sacrifice, in him rising, he shows you who you belong to. The whole process, he reminds you and shows you who you belong to. So I think of identity, that's what I think about. And I think there is a lack of that. I do. Because what does sin do? Now, there's a lot of conversation about what sin is, but sin ultimately, I think, is a reflection of decay. And when you look at the community, that's what you see. You see a decay nature, things dying constantly. And I think when it comes to identity, that's the whole purpose of the cross, the gospel, is to bring to life of who you actually are and who you belong to. I know, does that make sense? I know I was kind of rambling.
I get what you're saying. It makes me think of this book that I read in school on this idea of it was like a behavioral development stuff, childhood development. It was talking about this idea of the reciprocal self, and like when you get your sense of identity, the way that it's kind of developed is you get it reflected back to you by the people that you're connected to. And so I speak this thing and then they reflect it back. And then really in the beginning, actually, my identity comes from my parents and what language they teach me and who they tell me that I am and all those different types of things. So all those things kind of get poured into me, right? Like you're saying, it's borrowed in that sense. Those things get poured into me. And then as I develop, I start to reflect some of those things, plus some of the other things that I pick up. And then people around me say yes, or they say no to those things. And that kind of helps shape who I think that I am, if that makes sense. But I really, I get what you're saying too, on the whole idea of like, Christ shows us who we are, like 100%. I dig that.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting. Okay. So,
go ahead.
now you say people affirm. This is interesting because it's, to some degree it's true, right? When you're a child and you do things, and the community affirms right and wrong within you, and that their affirming of right and wrong has a stock in how you perceive yourself. Just the idea of correction in itself, that's interesting. But also, like, I think this is why when they say that you can, I think that's a deception thing, right? Like, the idea of becoming who you want, I think that's deceiving, because there is no starting point for you to even begin to know how to make yourself. That's why I think that Christ is what has to affirm that in his rebuke, in his reproof, his instructions,
Absolutely.
his light, his goodness, all that affirms who you are in him.
No, it's good. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. So I heard somebody talk about this a couple weeks ago. They were saying you can't be whatever you want. You can be what God created you to be. Which
Correct.
is
Yeah.
like, so like, I think most people haven't thought about that statement enough. But if you told them that, they would agree. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But
And I agree to a certain degree, to a certain extent. Like, I can't make myself a bird, right?
Right.
I can't do that. I can be the human that God has created me to be, But I think when I hear this question of where does identity come from? Because I think that that's kind of what you're saying to some degree, Chris, talking about within the origin of identity. It makes me think about nature versus nurture, right? How much of things are innately within us versus placed on us from our surroundings and the way that we're nurtured within this world. And I think that there are ways that you can, because I feel like right now there's certain things that I do think are naturally within me that have either not been developed or are just beginning to be developed and being, but there's work that's required of me, in order to learn and to shape, into acquire certain skills and certain knowledge. But yet when it comes to who I am, like at the core, my character, my temperament, like I think a lot of that is just comes from lots of different places. I mean, definitely see some aspects of nurturing that have been in there, right? But also, how much of this is just naturally me? I don't know. I have no clue. And I think that for us to be able to figure that out, I don't know that that's something that we may be able to uncover, because I don't know who I was when I was 1 year old. And I don't know that girl. I don't remember who I was when I was 2 and starting to formulate different thoughts and processes. I don't remember her, so as I watch, the closest I can get to discovering that is just from me watching my children, because I've seen them and I've seen their evolution. And I also see the effects of my nurturing on them too. Right. But I think for me, one of the things that has really been sitting is that whole identity piece. And I do think that a huge part of our identity definitely is in Christ, because when you are, understand yourself to be, a child of God, then Jesus came to show you, like whose you belong to, but also how you live and how you move in this world. And because I am a child of God, there's certain things that I will and certain things I won't do because of who I am in that aspect. And I just look at the way that I look at the ways that young people are influenced by different things. And I think a huge part of it is a lack of understanding of who you are. And because you don't know who you are, that's where you get that a lot of imitating. Like for me, I like there was, who was it, one school, maybe it's Spelman, Clark, one of them schools in AUC. Their whole motto is fake it till you make it. You know, you don't know, fake, put it on, like borrow somebody else's for a little while until you get your own and you figure it out for yourself, and then you can start, you know, carrying on, you know, however you are. But I think with a lot of young people, they imitate what they perceive to be the cool thing. And the problem is
Yeah.
what you perceive to be the cool thing. That's where the challenge comes in, where I think for a lot of young people.
I want to pose a question to both of you. I want to pose a question because I have to question the way the United States perceive identity. Is identity, why, my question is, why is it an individualistic thing? Why can't identity be a unifiable concept that we can all be? Right? When we say, like, is identity, does it have to be personal, or does it have to, can it be just a communal identity? Like, why does it only have to be personal?
I think it's what
Yeah,
you,
like, y'all get what I'm saying?
yeah, I think the answer to that lies in, for me personally, what you understand identity to be. How do you define identity? So when we're talking about identity, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, for me, when it comes to identity, is ultimately, um, identity is how do you perceive self, or how do
Mm-hmm.
you perceive those, yeah, how do you perceive self? But I don't know if that is the accurate way of seeing it. That's why I'm posing, is identity the wrong way of seeing, how do I say this? Is identity, hold on,
Your camera's gone again. There
is
you go.
is identity just a way of perceiving self, or is it how the community ought to see itself as a unit? Because when I read the scriptures talks about there are body parts, but we are all one. And when I read Paul urges us to be one-minded. And I think that also, and it's just, I'm not saying that's what he's saying, so I'm not trying to add nothing to the scriptures at all. I'm just really wondering, what does he mean by that? And if identity is a thing that we all pursue, and God gives all of us an identity, then is it more of a communal, unified thing and not just an individual thing? So I guess I'm just
It sounds
questioning.
like it could be layered, bro. Like in the sense that
Yeah.
they're both true. So there's this communal identity, but from the communal identity, I get my sense of who I actually am. Now I think we live in an age where that's kind of reversed. So like now identity is coming from within, and I project it outwards, which I perceive to
Mm,
be problematic. But once again, like I think the communal identity that you get, like so, like I understand who I am in context of my family too. Like I understand who I am in context of the fact that I have children and they call me dad. I have a wife and she calls me husband. You know what I'm saying? I have parents and they call me son and I call them mom and dad. So all of those things, like, so I'm getting this identity, the understanding of who I am and my role in this world based on that. But then also, like, if I go to
mm,
my church, right? Like I'm the youth and
mm,
young adults director. So like that kind of shapes who I am. Like when I hang out with my friends, you know, usually everyone comes and kicks it at my house, right? So that's that kind of shit. You see what I'm saying? So like all those things kind of like come together to help form and shape who I am and inform who I am as an individual. So like if I was gonna make an argument, I'd probably make an argument that I think like the communal layer is really important because it informs who I am as an individual and the part that I play in my community. And like my identity only really makes sense in context of community, like without other people to engage with and to reflect that identity too, and they reflect it back, and they know who
mm.
they are while engaging with me, and I know who I am while engaging with them. I don't know how it makes sense outside of that. You know what I'm saying?
That's
Um,
fair. I,
but yeah, I would probably start collectively, like yo, and I do think that's something that's missing, right? Like I think like, yo, how do we get our sense of identity from the whole? And here's how I mean it, like not living for myself. Like as I'm thinking about the things that I'm building, as I'm thinking about the wealth that I'm trying to generate, as I'm thinking about the values that I hold, I'm also thinking about the implications of those things for my children, the implications of those things for my grandchildren, right? Like what can I leave behind for them? How can I influence the next generation so that they can do what God's called them to do? And that informs who I think I should be today and the things that I think I should do today, if that makes sense. You tracking with what I'm saying? And so I think that's something that's, or I'm perceiving that's something that's been missing. Like we do live pretty individualistically because we live in the West, and that's kind of like how we rock. Like, yo, live for yourself,
Yeah.
do your thing, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. And I think there's a better way to live than that.
Mm.
But Candice, what do you think?
Man, what you said is definitely what I was processing, the layers of it, and what aspects of identity we're talking about, because I think that when it comes to that whole, different parts of the body, like we are, one body community, we all make up different parts of the body, and I can't, and I think some of that has to do, I think it has to do with a lot of different things, right? But I'll say
Mm.
that there's certain things that I I am not equipped to do that
Mm.
maybe one of you have to do in a way that you all have to exist in this world, but it all comes together so that we are still this one body that is functioning. But yet I
Mm.
think also that when it comes to maybe, and I might disagree with myself once we hang up from this call. But I think when it comes to another aspect of it, there is a mindset that is meant to be communal,
Yeah. Mm.
that we all
Yes.
that mindset that is meant to be communal, and I think that is a mindset
Yes.
of Christ that
Mm. Yes.
we are all meant to lead with. But I think that there's some aspects of identity that are very individualistic that come together just to create the vibe, right? that
Mm.
exists. Like some people have a bit more of a bubbly personality, some people are a bit more chill, and I think that there's places for all of that, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding yourself. For me, I was very shy. I feel like growing up, the person that I present now is not who I was when I was in grade school, maybe even middle school, maybe high school. I started coming out of my shell a little bit more. College, I think I even reverted back in a bit. The voice and the confidence that I have found in myself as an adult, it looks
Mm.
different than what it did when I was in some parts of my childhood, right? And I think that, but all of it is still very me. Professionally, I haven't never been given permission to be shy. I've always turn on because you got to stand up in front of somebody and you got to say something, right? But me, naturally, I'm pretty shy. If I go in a room, I probably won't say anything to anybody. Not because I'm rude. It's just because I'm very, very shy, and I think that that's an aspect of my identity, as aspects of
Mm.
who I am. So that's why it kind of comes back to when I say, like, hey, how are we defining identity and what are we talking about, that really kind of goes to answer that question, because I do think that I agree, there's layers, there's so many layers to it.
That's so good. That's such a good. I like it. All right. Last question I got to ask you, is we will literally be here for another hour, because I can tell we could go on all types of tangents right now. What is one thing that we are missing when it comes to Black youth? So I know you mentioned earlier, like the studies that you're doing and really focusing on the Black youth and their needs specifically. I'm thinking like, okay, I'm a youth pastor. I got Black youth showing up to my ministry. There's like a core group of them, or maybe I'm in the Black church and it's just Black youth, period. And like, I know that there's something I'm missing when it comes to engaging them in a way that's most beneficial for them. Like, what is one thing you would point to? Or if there's more than one, give us more than one.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty big question. I think a lot of the way that I would answer that question are through some things that we've already talked about. you
Okay.
know, and a huge part of it is just going back to Chris's example of us being in this valley and there's a fence around us,
Mm.
and what is the work that we're doing internally. And I think that in order for future, I think we find a lot more. There's a lot more adults these days that have the ability to set their children up differently than historically what we have had.
Mm, mm,
Yet
mm,
with that still comes a lot of pressure. And then I think that I know for me, and I only know how to make examples, through making it. I only know how to, but I think one of the things that I believe that God has called me to is to use my life to some degree as an example. But I think that the ways that I look at my grandparent, my paternal grandparents, both of them, one had a PhD in chemistry, another one had a doctorate in education, right? They got these doctorate degrees probably in the 50s, maybe 50s, 60s, something like that, when not a lot of people of color were pursuing advanced education. And the ways that my paternal grandmother pushed education on me, in some ways definitely helped to give me a vision for my life. But I think to some degree, it created some thoughts that I've had to um, work through and unlearn and relearn. Right. Forever grateful for my grandmother because I think that she gave me vision for my life when I had no vision, and that's very important. But I think that for us adult, and I'm still on this kick of this, what the adults are doing. I think that there's sometimes we place unnecessary pressure on young people to do whatever, and especially when it comes to just advancing. And I think that sometimes while it does set them up, I think it has the potential to do a disservice if it's just too much and we try to live, like that whole living vicariously and all that. So I
Mm.
think that it's important for us to just recognize the um, direct and indirect messages that we're given and the ways that they may be living it out, and being able to recognize the action and what's behind an action,
mm,
and being able to work and navigate with somebody through that. I don't personally think that the church can do it all. I think the church is just one vessel, one place that you go to receive the community. However, I think that the greater power lies within the broader village that comes around our young people any given day, and the way that the church can come together with the broader village. That's where true gold happens, and that's where true magic happens. Not looking at, because you find way more young people who are playing sports on Sunday mornings and what you might have once upon a time, right? What does it look like to work with an athletic team that's in your community, as opposed to being angry because kids are going to practice or going to a game instead of coming to church? What does it really look like to approach the holistic child as opposed to just the faith, their faith that shows up on a Sunday morning or on a Wednesday evening or whatever day y'all are getting together. Um, I think the holistic piece is definitely something that we can do better.
Mm. That's good. Candice, thank you for your time. Appreciate you.
yes, yes,
We will have to do this again because I feel like there's way more stuff to talk about that we did not talk about today. So you keep studying.
This was a long one,
Chris,
y'all.
yeah. Chris will keep reading philosophy, and then you can come answer all of our other questions that we have later.
Man, I never want to be an answer giver. Let's just process it together.
Hey, I like that. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So like we always say, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end.
yes.
Questions, comments, concerns, you know where to find us. We ain't hiding. We love to chop it up and dialogue. We love you guys, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.